our afternoon sessions. And this session is going to be about the space of culture and emotion in music and film. And in this session we have four presenters. The first one is Uthpala Herath, and the second presenter that came as a team, which are Krit Wong Asa and Kunchantira Danpo, and the third presenter will be Yang Xin Liu. Firstly, may I invite Uthpala Herath on stage, please. Please welcome. Alright, let me introduce you to Ms. Uthpala Herath a little bit. She is now working at the Department of Performing Arts in Sri Pali campus, University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. And today she's going to talk about hip-hop music in Sri Lankan culture in between globalization and glocalization. Alright, Ms. Uthpala, if you're ready, you can start, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation is about Sri Lankan hip-hop music and how it is established in Sri Lankan culture in the present situation. Sri Lanka, an island in Indian Ocean, cherishes a long and rich history of strong social, cultural and political alliance with different countries for centuries. But it is evident that the whole social and cultural structure of the country is heavily influenced by the great tradition of India. Later, with the colonization of Portuguese, Dutch and the British, the existing lifestyle, behaviors, cultural values and norms were rapidly changed in the island. Even today, the previous political reigns of the foreign rulers had affected in the process of shaping the entire culture. As an island close to Indian subcontinent, Sri Lankan culture highly valued Indian-influenced music, dancing and visual arts in different social spheres. However, the widespread acceptance of Theravada Buddhism in the island, which is also gifted from India, have not inspired aesthetic disciplines to spring out in the form of secular aspect in a large scale. Even the remaining ancient paintings, sculptures and auditory offerings are practiced in terms of Buddhism. This heavy influence of Theravada Buddhist practices and Buddhist philosophy, as well as Hindu philosophy, constructed the aesthetical taste and cultural products with a high consideration on philosophical thoughts. As a result, both Sri Lankan folk songs and the mass-accepted music styles and practices in later periods were heavily influenced by Buddhist and Hindu philosophical thoughts and Indian music. Although Sri Lanka was influenced by different Western musical styles during the European governances, Indian music rapidly established again as a tool to resist the European rule. Accordingly, the gist of the people's attitudinal existence was built with a larger influence of Indian norms and values. Hence, a non-Asian and secular music style like hip-hop brings a total strange atmosphere among the Sri Lankan listeners whose taste of music is shaped heavily based on Indian cultural and musical aspects. Therefore, this essay argues that Sri Lankan hip-hop music is a globalized cultural element which integrates local characteristics where possible. On the basis of globalization, this paper discusses about how Sri Lankan hip-hop music is constructed, blending global and local features, resulting in a shift in Sri Lankan music. Although it is difficult to mark the exact line of the beginning of Sri Lankan hip-hop music, 1980s to 90s can be identified as the dawning period of hip-hop in the country. According to different individuals, groups of young boys and several radio stations contributed in fostering the ardent thrill of young rappers. A closer inspection reveals that these promotions for rap music are drawn only by the urban and English-speaking youth who were involved with the new formations of technological usage. All connected common cultural environment of globalization process has made changes in music culture, broadening the possibilities of accessing musical artifacts in both local and global levels. This condition enhanced the availability of hip-hop CDs and DVDs in Sri Lankan market, but the country does not contain a large-scale retail of hip-hop music CDs or DVDs. So, internet plays a major role in exchanging and distributing Afro-American hip-hop tracks across borders. Most of Sri Lankan rappers have stated that they download hip-hop tracks from the internet to listen due to the small-scale market of hip-hop music in Sri Lanka. Consequently, those who are capable of easily accessing the technology created the background to bring forth rap music into the mainstream in Sri Lankan music industry. Therefore, when hip-hop music transcended the hip-hop culture of Afro-Americans to Sri Lankan culture, its iconic message became a disputed topic in this cultural context. As a consequence, the identity of hip-hop declines and dissolved in both contexts. After the commercial success of local hip-hop gained by Bhatia and Santush with the album Vasanthi in late 1990s, this novel music style was disclosed to the general audience. But this digitized music did not capable of attracting the general public to a degree. The major reason to disregard embracing hip-hop music in the island is the long-run effect of Indianization and effect of Theravadi Buddhist philosophy. Same factors provided the background to build higher esteem of being Asian and separate cultural elements as Asian us and Western others since European colonization. Combining with these reasons, core components of American hip-hop contrasted from the nature of soothing, emotional, melodious music that the general people were used to listen and admire in Sri Lanka. Thus, it was difficult to produce a large number of rap admirers in the Sri Lankan context in the beginning. Therefore, Sri Lankan hip-hop was harshly criticized by musicians and listeners who were heavily influenced by Indian music and local folk music. This resistance popped out in creating an ideology which emphasized about rhyming words, alliteration, improvisation, and considerable fast tempo practiced in ancient Sri Lankan poetry. However, the mere form of rapping that is combined with DJing is an unfamiliar ambience of hip-hop music within the Sri Lankan context. Since globalization escalated the opportunity to access a variety of music styles and cultures, its involvement in the creation and the incorporation of locality through mixing, blending, and adaptation in music making could be recognized in several ways in Sri Lankan hip-hop music. Accordingly, language, subject matter, musical style, and the song format became the key characteristics of dawning hip-hop which conveyed intertwined global and local music. In the sense of globalization, American and Sri Lankan musical features of Sri Lankan hip-hop songs were not in conflict but mutually reinforced. This was extended by the understanding of hip-hop music as an ardent and soulful music. Accordingly, through reconfiguring the structure of ordinary hip-hop music, Sri Lankan hip-hop became distinguished and differentiated, combining distinct and similar features in melody and lyric structure in hip-hop. The musical aspect of Sri Lankan hip-hop songs is the major component which transmits the homogenization of music and cultural global process. Heavy influence of American hip-hop music in the style of music production, rapping, accent, rhythmic structure, and pronunciation and making music exhibit the process of superseding the cultural barriers. Digital samplings of some songs are mere adaptations of American hip-hop, while a lot of digital sampling of mixtapes and breakbeats are inspired by American hip-hop music tracks. Since Sri Lankans are familiar with British style of accent and unfamiliar with Afro-American accent, listening to a lot of hip-hop tracks was the only tutorial for rappers to learn how to accent like real hip-hop. Even in Sinhala or Tamil languages, rappers tend to stick to this particular accent as possible as they can. In fact, this practice not only shows the declining of the essence of the identity of original hip-hop music, but also shows how globalization intensifies cultural homogenization. On the contrary, reconfiguration of a new identity in the music of hip-hop is also another dimension of globalization which involves globalization. The new identity was a combination of American and Asian notions. Giving an impression of Asian identity can be identified as an output which is highlighted as local in design and content. It is interesting to note that the new identity of Sri Lankan hip-hop music is emphasized towards Indian music rather than Sri Lankan music. Use of modern Bhangra beat, which was originally a Punjabi folk dance during the harvest festivities and later transformed into a pop-influenced sample beat, is a popular approach of shaping an Asian, rather Indian identity in hip-hop songs. Thus, this Asian identity of American hip-hop in Sri Lanka is gained by another distant foreign source. Such interpenetration of elements attracts not only local people but also different people in different cultures around the world. As a manner of localizing American hip-hop, a lengthy melody plays a major role in Sri Lankan hip-hop songs along with normal stanzas. The majority of hip-hop songs have added more music into the song than in American hip-hop. In the process of global and local integration, lengthy melody and its nature in hip-hop has been able to eradicate cultural borders yet developing distinctiveness. As opposed to adoption of American hip-hop, adoption of hip-hop beyond Indian-influenced music involves blending the global and local elements and displaying cultural fusion. Consequently, except for inspiration from Western pop music styles, local hip-hop artists seems to be considered having inspirations from Indian music, and they have also made use of Indian musical instruments to compose music for Sri Lankan hip-hop songs. The unique and primary feature that relocated and reformed American hip-hop into Sri Lankan context is the use of Sinhala language. The majority of the population speaks Sinhala since the majority of the population is Sinhalese. Except for Sri Lankan Sinhalese diaspora, the Sinhala language is spoken only by Sri Lankans. This background acts as an agent of reaching of Sinhalese hip-hop to the general listeners in the island. From this point onwards, rapping in English transformed into rapping in Sinhala, convincing that this external music style would stick to the local culture. In spite of having compressed or lengthy English raps, Sinhala raps, either brief or lengthy, appeared remarking the diversity created in hip-hop style in Sri Lankan context. In some instances, Sinhala lyrics are combined with compressed English raps as well as Sinhala raps. Some songs are inclusive of all three languages that is used very often in the country, which are Sinhala, Tamil and English. Hence, Sinhala rap is actually a result of the interpenetration of geographically separated cultures. The presence of one of the global elements of hip-hop lyrics in the Sri Lankan context is the use of rhyme and alliteration, which is similar to Afro-American hip-hop songs. Most of Sri Lankan rappers tend to convert the exact manner of rhyming and alliteration into Sinhala or Tamil accent. Unlike earlier lyricists, hip-hop lyricists have not followed the structures of such local classical poetries, and they began using day-to-day colloquial speech, developing rhyme and alliteration within. Thus, using everyday life dialect in songs was a novel experience and a controversial experience for local listeners. Therefore, on the basis of a global element, the format is transformed into a local nature. However, these linguistic changes break the language barrier, and it becomes the central fact to reach the listener as a way of conversing about the contemporary Sri Lankan society in depth. In early part of Sri Lankan hip-hop, most of the songs were about love, passion, lust and separation. Later, a nascent tendency could be seen in this music style, considering more about voicing for social and cultural corruption, violence, politics, ethnic conflict, use of cannabis, and sex. However, both American and Sri Lankan hip-hop seems to be sharing common messages, icons, and images regarding the social environment. Yet, in the bounds of Sri Lankan hip-hop music, the context is intimately linked with the contemporary local society. These themes of Sri Lankan hip-hop attest that through localizing a global element, the local music industry has been taking more advantage of making the concern of temporal issues in the country. All these themes are written based on the experiences encountered by Sri Lankans. In some instances, a slight inspiration of American context could be seen, but themes are associated with authentic Sri Lankan context. When considering about hip-hop fashion and stage names, most of the Sri Lankan rappers seems to be fond of hip-hop clothing style. For most of them, the clothing style is a manner of maintaining their identity as rappers. In fact, fashion is a cultural construction, and it is embodied with the identity of a certain community or a group of people. Thus, antagonism, discrimination and stigmatization of Afro-Americans were shown through their dress codes. When such attire is adopted by a disparate cultural context, its underlying meaning is lost or reformed. So in Sri Lanka, use of hip-hop fashion is a mere indication of urbanized, English-speaking individuals' involvement in the hip-hop music industry. On one hand, it conceals the style of a rapper's appearance, and on the other hand, it becomes a flown fashion style, dissolving its underlying meaning. Renaming of hip-hop artists is also another adoption of American hip-hop. As equal to original hip-hop rappers, a lot of Sri Lankan rappers have stage names, and they are popularized by their stage names, while some are known by only their first names. The important fact is that there are no explanations from artists on why these Sri Lankan rappers renamed their birth names. Unlike in American context, rappers are not recognized as individuals who are engaged with criminal gangs. Yet, those who have renamed their names are deeply inspired by Afro-American stage names. However, avoiding Sinhalese or Tamil stage names and embracing Afro-American influenced stage names is an indication of absorbing an identity which is extracted from its real essence. The same fact emphasizes how an identity can be spontaneous in a disparate context. So finally, I conclude that the emphasis of this paper is to disclose how Sri Lankan hip-hop music can be understood in terms of globalization and glocalization. Validity of such an understanding is to address contemporary cultural phenomenon on the basis of a contemporary theoretical frame. Since hip-hop music and its dynamics are ongoing occurrences in the present culture in the country, information offered here considered how music as a cultural product is changed in the present because of globalization and its offshoots. The scope reflected here is limited to adopting and adapting of hip-hop music after its advent in Sri Lankan culture. Therefore, this article provides an analysis of how music as a cultural aspect relocated and reinterpreted in Sri Lankan context. Thank you.
All right, very interesting. I'm sure that you would have questions, but I forgot to mention this because we're going to have like all presenters to present their work, and after that we will have question and answer QA session after that. So.